Welcome to Body of Light, episode 10, featuring J. Thomas Devins. Episode 10. Wow. What started as just a curious hunger for more information about the Tibetan rainbow body has evolved at this point in this project into not just focusing and dissecting on an intention of simplifying what is the Tibetan rainbow body, why does it happen, how does it happen, why does it happen to some and not others, can people in the Western world attain a rainbow body, what is the light body, how come it's in all these different cultures, what is it about, what does it mean. This is what sprung, these are the roots of this project, these types of questions. But now, at this point, ever since that interview with Lauren and Camille, it had a flip. So every time I have an interview, it changes me in some way. I get a different perspective on why I'm doing this project, the questions I ask, who I interview. And at this point in the film project series, I'm really focusing on not just about what is the Tibetan rainbow body and the light body and really going deep into it, but also how can people like you and I attain, reach, allow the same level of self-mastery, of enlightenment, you can say, as these beings who do have rainbow body death experiences, create a light body, dissolve into light, what people we call like ascended masters like Yeshua, Jesus, the Buddha, the different saints and yogis of the world. How can people living in the Western world engage in Western life, embody the same similar qualities, attributes, parts of their personality, how they act, how they live, and use them as role models or influences on how we can be our own unique versions of Christs, of Buddhas, of ascended masters, of human beings that want to live out their full life's purpose and be as loving, compassionate, in service, and present with themselves, with their families, with their work, with their projects, with their art. So that's really where this project is starting to move into at this point. Episode 10 is how can beings like you and I possibly, who are engaged in the modern world, having jobs or families or living out passions, how can we embody and experience the same qualities, the same love, the same clarity, the same light as these beings who spend 10, 15 years in a cave, who are deep in the aesthetic yogi lifestyle, who are the saints and like Ananda Maima, who are in deep service and embody these different qualities of love and compassion and clarity. How can we do this without becoming a monk, without going in the forest and living as a yogi, without living in a cave for 10, 15 years? Or is that necessary? And is that even possible? So those are the questions I go deep on here with J. Thomas Devins. He is a unique individual on this topic because he comes, like Father Francis Tiso, from a Christian background. He worked as a chemical engineer in his early life and a businessman. He then found out about the Tibetan rainbow body and was starting to find clues and links how the Tibetan rainbow body is linked to the Shroud of Turin. So he's an author. He writes books. He makes videos. Some are controversial, which I love, about linking the Dzogchen Tibetan rainbow body system practices, ways of being, seeing, living, related to what science is discovering and unfolding about the Shroud of Turin, and that how Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, theory is that he practiced or knew about these universal teachings that the Tibetans also knew about that they called Dzogchen. Maybe Jesus learned some of those practices or he learned them from somewhere else around where he lived, because they're all universal. All different spiritual traditions have some similar light body development practices of mastering the mind, body, and energy. So Tom has done a lot of investigation on the Shroud of Turin, and that it looks like, based on what they're finding about the Shroud, is that he had a light body experience, is the theory. So we go deep about linking Dzogchen to the Shroud of Turin, talking about Yeshua, Jesus. We talk about the Gospel of Thomas, which is not very well known, and how the things that Jesus supposedly said in the Gospel of Thomas is deeply related to Tibetan, Vajrayana culture, teachings, Dzogchen teachings, and such. Again, really touching on how the Shroud of Turin looks like proof, could actually be proof that is being studied by scientists that light body exists, that beings can dissolve into light. Because it seems, the theory is that Yeshua actually did dissolve into light, and that's what his glory body or resurrection body is. We go really deep into that. Was the resurrection of Yeshua, Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus the Christ, a miracle? Or can anyone do what he did? Why would one want to attain the rainbow body or light body? What's the point? And then again, we do touch on that main question that I'm asking everyone is, can Western people engage in Western modern affairs on a spiritual path, reach that same level of enlightenment, attainment, love, mastery, create a rainbow body or create a light body living in the Western world without leaving the world? Is that possible? Something also really unique about Tom is he also, like Father Francis Tiso and others that I interview, went to the site, the hermitage in Tibet, where Khenpo Acho, the monk who supposedly completely dissolved into light, that was deeply studied by Father Francis Tiso, who wrote part of his book on that case. Tom actually went there himself and talked to eyewitnesses, talked to monks, talked to people who were there, and investigated that for himself. Also finding a Dzogchen Rainbow Body College school. We talk about this. We go into, why does the body shrink? What's that about? We also talk about why the rainbow body teachings, light body teachings are so obscure and hidden to most of the world, and why there's no documented cases, eyewitness cases of people living in the West who are not monks or nuns or yogis living a very hermitage type of lifestyle, people who are engaged with families in modern life on the path of some sort of spirituality, self-mastery. Why is there no documented cases of those people shrinking, dissolving into light, disappearing at the time of death, showing beautiful rainbows, lights, the things that happen from a rainbow body death? Why has that never happened or has been documented or even eyewitnessed or even stories that I have found in the West? Why is that? This and much more we go over in episode 10. So please enjoy. J. Thomas Devins. All right. So first question I like to ask is, in your own words, speaking as general as possible, what is specifically the Tibetan rainbow body?
I would call it, depends on your perspective, but from an outsider looking in, it is a phenomena where a human body occupied by a very spiritual person vanishes from sight, giving off a stream of rainbow colored light. In most cases, 99% of the cases, the body would shrink to about the size of a loaf of bread. But in rare cases, and the one that I'm most familiar with is the 1998 death of the Buddhist monk Khenpo Cho, that in rare cases, the body just completely disappears. Okay. And people call it the body of light, but it's not a body of light. If there's light present, if a human being sees light, there are photons present. And the way photons become present is where something at the atomic level is going from a high energy state to a low energy state. That energy differential, okay, is manifest in photons. And the fact that it's multicolor means there are photons that are vibrating at different frequencies. So it's an atomic thing that's going on. The characteristic of the people who achieve this rainbow body is that they are totally selfless people. They're not concerned about themselves. And as the Buddha said, that when his attendant Ananda, his cousin Ananda, asked him, what does it mean when the world is empty? Buddha responded, the world is empty when it's empty of self. Okay. Now, I have a little bit different perspective than most people because I've studied the practice that they follow, and it's called Dzogchen. You probably know that. All right. In fact, at the Dzogchen Monastery in Tibet, there is a rainbow body school. They teach you how to do this. It's a learnable skill. It's a skill set. All right. And I've studied Dzogchen. I had a Dzogchen master that I took one lesson from, and I discovered I knew more about it than he did. So I dropped the lesson. And my perspective is there is an equivalent of Dzogchen in the Christian culture, and it's the Gospel of Thomas. I don't know if you know about Thomas, and they equate. And Jesus, it's a Jesus teaching. Unfortunately, it didn't make it to the canon in the Bible. And so a lot of people don't know about the Gospel of Thomas. But it starts out, those who understand the interpretation of these words will never taste death. And then he goes on to give you methods that you can use to be selfless, to get rid of yourself. One of which is you don't give a damn about what people think about you. You just do what you want. You be yourself. While in Dzogchen, from a distance, we watch the body disappear into rainbow colored light. In the Christian culture, in Christian tradition, we know what happens. And we know that by the research on the Shroud of Turin. We know how the body comes apart into its atomic parts and then into the primordial state from which it came. Hundreds of years of research tell us that. So if you know both Christian and the rainbow body culture, you tie them together. And the thing that falls out of it, from which is obnoxious to the Christian, is it was no miracle. And it's just a learnable skill. You give up the self. And I don't know how you can be more selfless than to give up your life just to prove a point to someone that what'll happen 3 days later, but that's who he was. And the problem I have, I've gone through Dzogchen, I've gone through Rainbow Body, I've been there, I've talked to eyewitnesses and so forth, and no one will accept that here. Yeah, you get out of here. You're crazy. I've talked to any number of particle physicists about it, and they won't talk about it. Said you're hallucinating. Those things can't possibly happen, and so you run into a stone wall. Anyway, that's my take on it. I have more of a Western view than I do an Eastern view of the phenomena. And the Western view being the resurrection of Jesus Christ. There is some movement in the Catholic Church of recognizing this, because in the liberal Franciscan theology, Father Richard Rohr, I don't know if you've heard of Father Rohr, but he now teaches to his congregation, there was no Jesus Christ. There was a Jesus of Nazareth, a dirt poor rabbi who had a peasant following. But Christ is the label we put on him because he developed his selflessness. He's not the son of Mr. and Miss Christ. He's Jesus of Nazareth, just a regular person that did things that we can't do. Okay. Anyway, that's where
that's a great point, because I see Christ as like a label, like a Buddha, a Christ.
Yes.
It's a frequency. It's a like a office, you can say.
Right. Exactly. And Richard Rohr, Father Rohr, would teach that our objective in life is to develop our innate Jesus nature. We've all got it. All right. He just did a better job than any of us of bringing it out. But if you bring it out, as he said, you will become one with the Father. But he doesn't mean some kind of personal God as the Father. He means the primordial state from which we came.
Yes.
So,
So if this is something teachable, it's something that can be learned like a skill, or in Sanskrit, it could be called a siddhi, right?
mhm.
Why, in your opinion, why aim for this? What do you think happens when one attains the rainbow body? If it's a goal or a skill, why do it?
You, it's addictive. And once you get started on it, it grows on you. The path is the goal. And once you go, and I'm trying to go down that path myself, and believe me, I no way I'm going to die with a rainbow body. But when you go down the path, you find it's transformational, and you can't get enough of it. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I follow the Ceylon meditation that rainbow body adepts use. And I've got myself to the point where everything is totally blank. And I get afraid I'm not going to come back. And it's the most frightening thing you can do, but you can't get enough of it. There's just something about nothing. I don't know if you've been to my website lately, but I have a little lead-in video about nothing.
I have
And
seen.
are you ready to nothing? Okay. I've getting a lot of takes on that. So, but there's just something about nothing. It's hard to explain. You can't explain it to anyone. You got to do it. And it's just
I have seen that video. Yeah, I actually really I like the flair of it. I think it's really well done. Yeah, I have experienced that. I was getting pretty intense into like Dzogchen practices myself, and specifically the Trechko type meditations. But I'm 37, I have a 5-year-old kid, I'm an entrepreneur, I live in a city. What I was noticing is that as I was doing the practices more, they were starting to work, and I was starting to like get into these or work. I was starting to get into these states where I was, I guess you can say, in that nothingness, and I didn't want to do anything. I'm just like in this state to show up in my roles as husband and father and so on were very challenging. So I had to actually kind of pump the brakes a little bit, and
I could understand that. I could
because they were
understand
starting
that.
to do what they do, right? Like the practices. So
Look at
yeah,
Jesus of Nazareth. He rejected the normal work ethic. The man never worked a day in his life. He sold everything. And he depended on other people to provide for him.
do you feel that Westerners, people engaged in Western affairs who live in the Western world, who are on a spiritual path, say like you and I, can we attain the rainbow body? Is it possible?
Yeah, it's possible.
Staying engaged in the Western affairs without becoming a monk or going to India, like keep living our lives. Is it possible, do you feel?
It's possible, but it'll never happen. They're just surrounded with too much materiality to make it happen. Let me just can I elaborate on that for just a minute?
Please, because that's one of my main
When I,
questions.
when I go to the Gospel of Thomas, all right, one of the sayings in the Gospel of Thomas is, well, one of the sayings is, it's a marvel when spirit becomes flesh, i.e., reincarnation, but it's a marvel of marvels when flesh becomes spirit. Of course, that's rainbow body, and that's what Jesus is teaching in the Gospel of Thomas. But he never says in there to become selfless. But what he says is, how does it go? I can't remember the exact saying. He says, you make the upper like the lower, the inner like the outer, make the male like the female like the male, so that there's no such thing as male and female. There's just one. All right. And so what he's really saying when you start practicing that is you look at everything is the same. Okay. And self is the thing that makes me think I'm different from you. But if everything's the same, there's nothing to be different from. And so I've eliminated the self. Okay. And so what you train yourself to do is to look through form, physicality and form, and find the sameness of everything. And that's a mind training thing. You can do that, but you got to get in a cave for 10 or 15 years to do that. Probably the thing that speaks to that in the modern world is the very last saying in the Gospel of Thomas, saying number 114, is Jesus's disciples say, we need to get rid of Mary. I think they're talking about Mary Magdalene, all right, because she doesn't believe as we do. Okay. And Jesus says, no, I'll transform her. Well, he doesn't mean he's going to give her a sex change operation. He means he's going to take off all the paint, the perfume, the glitter, and the glow, and make her like a male. And so, probably the biggest thing in my experience that stands different between making everything the same is the male and the female, because we have a culture that makes them different. We have female department stores, we have male department stores. Okay. What clothing is different. Uh, so it's just almost impossible to do. And we've all got responsibilities. Like you got a child, you got breadwinner, and you got to do all these things. We can't just throw everything away. But that's what literally what you have to do to make this happen, is to make everything the same so that you got nothing to be different from.
From my research and study, a lot of people, at least the documented ones who attain rainbow body, were very, very intensely involved in the caves and the hermits and a monk or a sadhu or a saint or a nun. There's accounts of lay people also, but they're still living in the Himalayas or living in where they are. So I appreciate how direct you are with that question.
Khenpo Cho spent 17 years living in caves.
Right.
Not all at one time, but he'd get a teaching and then he'd retreat to a cave. And I know you know the Saint Milarepa. God only knows how long he lived in a cave. And when you go to the Dzogchen Monastery and look at the Rainbow Body School, it takes about 12 years, I'm told, on the average, to go from where you are today to Rainbow Body candidate. But there's a string of caves there, and that go up the mountainside. Unfortunately, when I was there, it was raining, and I don't know, I was 81, 82 at the time, and I just didn't feel comfortable going up a slippery slope to a cave, so I didn't get to do it. But they decorate their caves. They got flags and they got furniture in them and everything. They're livable, but it's just away from everything.
82. How old are you now?
I'm 83 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
You look great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
I
you
wish I felt great. It's beginning to show. Age is beginning to show.
So you were actually, I know you visited Khenpo Acho's hermitage and site. You actually went to this Dzogchen school. I wasn't even aware of this.
I found the school, okay, and I looked at it, but I didn't go in it. I went to places in Tibet I wasn't supposed to be, all right, and that was one of them, all right. It wasn't on my agenda, but my guide took me there, okay, and so I sent him back when I got back in the States and asked him to go back and actually interview some students there. And they've had after the destruction, I think in the, I don't know, I'm gonna say the early 1990s or so, since they rebuilt the school, they've had, I think he told me they had 22 students now and 18 rainbow body deaths to their credit. is what he said. I'm getting off track here, but I got to tell you, I went to the Kempo site, the memorial. I met his attendant, Lama Lapsang Nindrak, had breakfast with him. All right. And you walk away from that, and I'm still, this really does happen, but I still got some lingering doubt. And Lama Nindrak gave me books he wrote on the Kempo's life. I had one of them translated to English, all right, which I've got. I'd be more than happy to give you the transcript if you'd like to see it. It's hard, it's very difficult to read. It's all kind of Tibetan things. There's a copyright attached to it. I had to free 10 trapped animals in order to distribute the book to anyone. That was a copyright restriction. But we're thumbing through one of the books, and my guide says, "Oh my God, that was my teacher." He saw of it. He was a rainbow. He was a friend of Kempo Echo's, and he said, "I couldn't believe it when I went to his funeral." He said his body was like this. He was just this big, and the guide was in his middle 30s, and he's like most people in their middle 30s now. They just reject the traditional religion that they grew up with, and they're finding it on their own. And he was in that category, but he knew, he'd seen it himself. And there's no religious out of control fervor there. I mean, he actually saw it. He was amazed that he couldn't believe it happened. And of all the people I talked to, he was probably the most convincing. Just being around him, it
So
does happen.
So he saw Kempo Acho's small. I thought Kempo Acho completely disappeared, leaving nothing behind.
Disappeared. Right.
But there was
Yeah.
he saw a shrunken form of him though before he vanished.
And no. In the book that Lama Nindrak gave me, there was a picture of, I can't, Puchag or something. I can't remember his name, but he had been thrown in jail. He helped a Tibetan with a horse that was used in some kind of insurrection, and so the Tibetans threw him in jail. All right, but when he comes out, all right, he dies of a rainbow body, and he recognized his picture, and he told me, "I was there. I saw that body burn." And he said it was like 4th of July fireworks popping and cracking, and he said it was a spectacle when the body burned, when they cremated what was left. So the Kempo completely disappeared. It's kind of a don't ask, don't tell kind of thing there. I wanted to go when we were in Ganzi. There, the regional newspaper wrote an article about Kempo Cho, and I wanted, and I had a Tibetan with me. I wanted to go and retrieve that article and translate it. I've read about it. I wanted it in my own possession, but he said, "No, we're on the fringe already. You don't want to start snooping around like that. You'll be on a plane out of here tonight." So we didn't do that. I regret not being able to do that. It's just, it's nothing that the Chinese really want to publish.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
Well,
sure.
being anti-religion, but it has nothing to do with religion. It had nothing to do with God. This is just a skill that people acquire.
Why do you think the bodies shrink? What do you think that's about?
I explain it using quantum quantum science of the atom. All right. And so you're made of atoms. We're all made of atoms. There's 7,000 trillion atoms, okay, in the human body, average in the human body. And those atoms are atoms. You have those days when you're uptight. Everything just, nothing goes right. You're just all uptight. You're solid. All matter has a dual nature. It's either solid, okay, perceived as solid, or it's what we call a wave. So if you took a flashlight and you turn the flashlight on, you're generating photons, and you aim at a wall. If you notice, in between the wall and the tip of the flashlight, there's nothing. The photons are a wave. And when they hit something solid, then they turn into an illuminated spot, and they are particle, wave, particle. In this book I'm writing on the Shroud of Turin, I go into great detail because the thing that science can't accept is in the flashlight, why did that wave turn to particle? You did. You made it turn to particle because that's what you expected to happen. That's why you turned the flashlight on. You made that happen. Now, you can get much more in what's called the Thomas Young double slit experiment. You can get much more detailed than that. But that's just kind of to give you an idea of wave particle. And so you and I right now, we are particle. Okay. And if we can turn selfless, we go to wave. We can transform ourselves. But as long as we're paying attention to ourselves, we're particle. And the way you pay attention to yourself is through the self. Okay. And so, and here's something that I've discovered, and I'm looking forward to issuing my book if I could ever find time to complete the manuscript, because I know something no one else knows. When you go to Dzogchen, you got two phases. You got Trechko and Thogel. All right. And you will know that they both practices proceed in parallel, but you can't do Thogel until you've finished Trechko. Okay. And now go back to the Shroud of Turin. At the moment that his body disappeared, he achieved Trechko. All right. He went to wave. All right. And from wave, the atomic particles then went back to their primordial state. So the research on the shroud shows that when it went from particle to wave, look how my hand expands, particle to wave. And what happened is the blood stains on his body were physically lifted and pushed into the cloth. And the cloth was contoured around his body. It went horizontal with the slab. Bang, wave. It went from particle to wave. And then radiation took place. And we know that because there's no image under the blood stains. The blood stains happened first, all right? And then the body radiated away. And it's the radiation that caused the image on the shroud. And there's not a scientist in Western culture can figure that out because they don't understand Trechko and Thogel. They don't understand Dzogchen. And those blood stains can't be lifted. They can't be lifted until that you go to wave. It's the wave that forces them. And so you ask the question, what happens to the body? It goes to wave. It's that area in between the flashlight, in between the tip and the wall. That's where you are. And from there, then radiation takes place.
And that's what's creating the shrinking of the body?
Yeah, yeah. See, the other thing that escapes scientists, particularly shroud scientists, is Einstein's equation, E equal mc squared. And you tell that to someone and they say, oh, it's an equation for an atomic bomb. No, E equal mc squared means that when I use my flashlight, all right, and generate photons, the batteries in that flashlight are losing weight, losing mass. Okay. If I lift a bowling ball from the floor up to here and get a hernia, but if I do that, right, that bowling ball weighs more. It has more mass. Just because that's the energy. And so what's happening is the mass of our body is just returning to energy. And so as it turns out, E equal mc squared, the equal sign is a tunnel. E can go to M, or M can go back to E. And if you try to eliminate E on the right side of the equation, and it's explosive. But if you eliminate it by going back through selflessness, then it just goes back through the tunnel and it goes back to E, the primordial state.
I love the scientific approach to it too, because we are physical, so there has to be a level of science that's going on with all this. So thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, when he went from particle to wave, push, it lifted the blood stains, forced them into the cloth, and the blood stains are a replica of the wound they came from. Under high resolution photography, they can even tell the type of torture instrument that created the wound. All right. And the serum contraction ring, every one of them, the contraction ring, it already contracted. It forms around the blood stain, and you can see it. When you cut yourself, the thing that happens is the serum in your blood separates, so the corpuscles then can coagulate and seal off the wound. And that's what happened to Jesus as he was flogged. The serum moved out, but when they moved it off of the cloth, when they got moved off of the cloth, you can see them. It's there on the bloodstain.
Thank you for that. I want to move back so we have enough time for this question about Westerners, because that's one of my main intentions, is to use, in a way, beings who attain rainbow body, like Jesus, like Campo Acho, and the many others, as role models, one can say, or as influences of how we can live our life. So what would you suggest people like us, people living in the West, how can we take how they lived or are living and apply the same type of attributes or common like realities of how they're living to us who are engaged in this life, not to attain rainbow body, but to
Get on the path.
be on the path, but still wash the dishes and drive the car and do the thing. What would be your suggestions, either what you do
Yeah.
or what you would suggest?
You know, I'm going to back up just a little bit. Okay. All right. So E equal mc squared, we're all energy. That's all we are is energy. All right. And once you say you're energy, then you invoke the second law of thermodynamics. Everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket sooner or later. Right. So I can take a brand new car, brand new Lexus, and park it out in a field. And I could take all the individual parts that car is made of and put it next to them. If I come back 1,000 years later, the car would have gone in direction of the parts, but the parts won't go in the direction of the car. They won't assemble themselves, but it will disassemble. And so when you really look at Jesus's teachings in the Bible, this comes out clear in the Gospel of Thomas, but if you look at him in the Bible, he's really saying it's all going to hell in a handbasket anyway, so why keep it together? He says, let it be. Don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, what you're going to do. Be random. Everything is random. All right. Don't work. Somebody will take care of you. Just believe. And that's what he taught. And he was really the first teacher of the second law of thermodynamics by the way he lived. And what I would suggest to people is that to the extent you can, you do two things. You introduce as much randomness as you can in your life. Okay. And then you don't give a damn what people think about you. You do what you want. And it's what somebody thinks of you is none of your business. right? And that fits him to a T. And so I practice that. I try to practice that. Okay. When I empty my dishwasher, I will not put the spoons here, the forks here, the knives here. I don't. I get rid of. I don't want any order in my life. I want total disorder. But I can't do that. I can't do that. But you just little subtle reminders as you go through the day, all right, of eliminate, quit ordering your life and let it be. What's his name? Living in the now. The
Eckhart Tolle.
author. Yeah, living it. Just live in the now. And I stand in line at the grocery store in the checkout line, and I look at the people in front of me, and I say, we're all the same. I remind myself that we're all the same. We're just energy in different forms. So, and one time, I got to the point where quit forming your life is that I went out and bought women's clothes and went to Walmart shopping just so there won't be a difference. No one said anything. It's kind of bothered me. But, you know, because that's one way of ordering our lives. You wear this, you're different. No, we're not different. Genesis 2:25. The man and his wife were both naked, but they knew no shame. Okay? It's biblical. All right. And then they ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge in good and evil. And what did they do? They put on clothes. They became aware that they were naked. So they allowed duality to enter their lives when they took a bite of the fruit. And where was that tree located in the Bible? It's in the middle of the garden. Not over here, not over here. It's in the middle. When you look at everything, you're in the middle. When everything's the same, you're in the middle. And so what happened was that was interpreted by theologians of the day as an act of disobedience. And so they left the garden as punishment, all right, for and led a life of bloody knuckles, sweat, toil, and bloody knuckles. But the sweat, toil, and bloody knuckles really comes from the fact that they allowed duality to enter their lives by eating the fruit. Sin, punishment, mistake, and consequence. All right. And the sin and punishment thing just held with us. And it's beginning to weaken a little bit these days. All right. In Catholic teaching, but it's still there. I look at all the things I've done over my life when I was I still consider myself Catholic when I was a practicing Catholic. And I did things because they were difficult, and I suffered result of it. And I did it because that would be a down payment on the sins I'm going to have to account for in the afterlife. Right? But what I really was doing by suffering from is eliminating duality. I don't need that. And that message got lost right after Jesus' death, and it's Jewish. It's the old Jewish paradigm, sin and punishment. And God demands justice, suffering and pain, right, for your sins. And we have a hell and a purgatory and a hell and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that whole non-duality thing of we're all one, I think that's very, we hear that all the time, but to actually see how when you mention the male and the female, that simple duality of that, looking at our current times, when you have some powers that be trying to create a billion different identities as far as gender go, and to get people
Right.
identifying so much with their body and I'm this and I'm that, to create even more separation, because we are all one, and that is like the law of one, right? It's like I think that's so important. And what I'm hearing you say is that people, these different people who attain rainbow body are completely embodying that we are all one and everything is
Absolutely.
one through Dzogchen or whatever practice. When you actually realize that and then live it and then create your environment to suit that, the body dissolves into light.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. And when you look at it from another perspective, if I'm successful in believing the oneness of everything, okay, that means the guy standing next to you is the same as you, and the space that separates you is material too. It's got air. It's all the same, okay? And then there is no such thing as space. Space disappears. All right, if you look at a picture of me 10 years ago and look at me today, all right, to the dual person, I'm different. But if I'm the same, then there's no time either. You've eliminated space and time. And then this thing we talked about at the start of the discussion, this emptiness, there's no space, there's no time. You've gone back to the pre-Big Bang condition that is primordial. All there was energy, and it was random. It didn't segregate dogs from cats or men from women. It's just active. It's just random, and that's that oneness, that emptiness that we discover. When we get into a deep meditation mode. So, no space, no time. You just go back to pre-Big Bang condition.
I've heard rainbow body being said as like, you can say, the ultimate enlightenment, right? As far as the Buddhist terms go. I have a theory, and I've heard you say this in your own way. I feel if we work through our karma and we weren't so layered with beliefs and trauma and poison from food and what have you, that we would all die this way, possibly. This can be a natural way that the human is meant to exit this realm. And if that say that's the case, and say this is an ultimate form of enlightenment, why is it so hidden? Like, why is it so obscure? And why are there no cases of like Westerners or people who are living in West? I have not found one person living in the West who's not a Tibetan or from India or what have you, who attain rainbow body. So like, why is it so hidden, and why is it such a obscure topic if this is maybe the natural way of dying, quote unquote? What do you think about that?
I think it's because I get back to the emptiness thing. It's the duality. We're faced with duality everywhere we turn. This car, that car, this ball team, that ball team, this person, that person. All right. And and what you find, going back to E equal MC squared and concentrating on the E will not tolerate a duality. Okay. So you're at dinner last night, and your waiter, you ordered 2 glasses of wine, and the waiter forgot and only charged you for one. Okay. And then you take advantage of that. You save a few bucks. That's a duality. You've got something you did that's wrong and needs to be resolved. That's karma. It's going to come back to you. You leave this world with karma, you're coming back. Okay. And you're going to die in a body. You got to get rid of the karma. And you do that by duality, non duality. Everything's the same. You wouldn't want to be treated that way if you were the waiter. He probably had to pay for that himself.
So why though? Why eliminate the karma? Why do, like, I know I asked this before, but why do that? Why eliminate karma? Why see everything as one? What's the reward for doing that, do you think?
You don't have to come back. All right. You don't reincarnate. There's only 2 ways you can get here. is that you exit this world with some karma attached to you. You're coming back. You got to resolve that duality. Or you can come back like Jesus or Kimpo Cho because you got a point you want to make to people out of compassion, out of love and compassion. It's the only two ways you can come back. I see what a screwed up world, a terrible world this is. There's so much suffering, and I'm fed up with it. All right. I'm ready to go, to be honest with you. So, because of all the suffering, children are starving to death. We're sending military equipment to Ukraine. Kids are starving. I've got a project I'm working on in my travels to Nepal and Tibet. I used to attend orphanages, visit them, and I met this little orphan girl. She was 16 at the time. She was orphaned at age 4 and never knew her parents. All right, just from 4 years old. And age 18, she left. At age 16, she did a heroic thing, and she walked for 5 days and found her parents. And they lived in a village. And they had no running water, no electricity, open defecation. All right, and they spoke a strange dialect. She could hardly understand him. It was just a heart-wrenching moment for me when she finally finds that village and she asks for this particular family. She goes into that hut. It's a mud hut. And she walks across, and an elderly man's there. It turned out to be her grandfather. She introduced herself. And he said, "That's your mother." First time she'd seen her mother. They walked over, and her mother just couldn't keep her hands off of her. So I I took her under my wing. She's in Kathmandu now, and she is. I have her going to St. Xavier College in Kathmandu, kind of an elevated high school. It's not the same, you know. And I want to bring her to the United States. I've tried 3 times, and I can't. They're so afraid that she gets over here, so they won't come back. That's terrible. We're the wasteland of the free. We should be inviting people. She's taken care of. She's not going to be a public charge. And when she gets her education, I'll make sure she goes back. Nope, we don't want that girl over here. That's a terrible thing. And I refuse to pay an attorney. I have the religious obligation doing to others as you would have them do unto you. I refuse to pay an attorney and help pay his country club dues just so I can exercise my religious rights. So I spend a lot of my time being an attorney. I'm representing myself in a lawsuit against the federal government. Those are the things you got to do. And I'm not sure 10 years ago I would have done that. But once you get on the path and you just keep reminding yourself, you know, that it's all, everything's the same. And you put your knives and forks and spoons all together, all right? And occasionally put on a dress and go to Walmart. You just, something happens to you when you start on that path and you begin to transition. I'll never make it to rainbow body status. There's just too much distraction here. You know, I can't do what Jesus does and take out all order in my life and just totally be random. But you can move in that direction. And I believe in reincarnation. Who knows? 2 or 3 more lifetimes, I might have it. You never know. Right. So.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much, brother. Is there anything you'd like to add? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I want to add one thing. All right. When you walk in a room and it's pitch dark and you flip the light on, are you illuminating the contents of the room, or are you creating photons that bounce off of the contents of the room and enter your eyes? What do you believe? And the truth is, you're generating photons. They enter your eyes, all right, through your nervous system. you create an chemical electrical impulse in your brain, and you understand what's in that room. All right, it's all in your mind. And you interpret what the information that's coming in with those photons, and you interpret that as to what's in the room. What you interpret may be exactly what's in the room, but the point is, it is an interpretation. And if it's an interpretation, you can interpret it any way you want. Okay? You can look at the individual contents, but you can also convince yourself that it's just all energy. It's all the same. Right? It's the way you interpret it. And imagine what's taking place in your I used to call it embodied mind. I call it now minded body. We're all mind, but you interpret it. Where is that being displayed? You're not seeing what's out there. It's interpreted in your mind. Is there a little screen in the back of my eyes that is being displayed on? And if so, who's looking at it? How do I know what's out there based on my interpretation? And that's the other part of the transition. The path that you're on is you don't care what people think about you. All right. You eliminate order as best you can in your life, and you contemplate the mind. I don't see you. I get photons coming toward me, and I interpret that you're there. But what am I displaying it on? How do I see that? What's it? All right. And there's no answer to that, but every minute you spend thinking about that is one less minute you're going to spend about what am I going to eat, what am I going to wear, how am I going to entertain myself. It's that emptiness that you're looking for. And that's all. I hope that will help you along your way.
Empty, there ain't nobody. Illusory, transform to rainbow body. Clear light shining, calmly abiding. Great perfection, rainbow body. Empty, there ain't nobody. Illusory, transform to rainbow body. Clear light shining, calmly abiding. Great perfection, rainbow body.